The Spin-off Podcast Network.
Are you making the most of your KiwiSaver investment? Generate is an award-winning KiwiSaver provider with a track record of strong long-term performance. Making a smart decision now could add tens of thousands of dollars by the time you reach retirement. Book a no-obligation chat with a Generate KiwiSaver advisor today at generatekiwisaver.co.nz/get-advice. A copy of the product disclosure statement is available at generatekiwisaver.co.nz. The issuer of the scheme is Generate Investment Management Limited, and of course, past performance does not guarantee future returns.
I'm Toby Manhire, and this is Juggernaut, the story of the Fourth Labour Government, a podcast in 6 parts.
Doesn't give my opponents much time to run up to an election, does it?
This nation is at risk.
What do you think you're up to now, you perverted little liar?
I could smell the uranium on it as you lean towards the
Most radical overhaul in the history of New Zealand's administration.
Juggernaut, the story of the Fourth Labour Government, made with the support of New Zealand On Air. Listen now on the Spin-off or wherever you get your podcasts. Mai kake mai haere mai. Welcome to Gone By Lunchtime. I'm Toby Manhire. That there is Annabelle Lee. Hello, Annabelle Lee.
Kia ora.
And that there is Ben Thomas. Hi,
Morning.
Ben Thomas, you've been getting assailed on twitter.com recently, which you just told me you've deleted from your phone.
Twitter.com, my number one news source.
Gone into hiding because people are onto you, working in the shadows with Exceltium Enterprises. Seriously though, we may as well just do this now. One of New Zealand's leading media commentator asked you the question, which party in the Todd Barclay affair, l'affaire de Barclay, are you working for? Who are you working for in the Barclay affair?
Yeah, right. So, I mean, obviously with any kind of firm, you don't sort of take requests on who your clients are. We've got a pretty firm rule that whenever we're talking about a client, doing commentary, we disclose that fact, as regular listeners of Gone By Lunchtime will know from previous disclosures. Given that I think by now I've been on Radio New Zealand, Radio Live, News Talk ZB and TV3 talking about the Barclay issue and have not made a disclosure, which means I'm not working for anyone involved.
Did he answer that question to your satisfaction, Annabelle?
He did indeed.
So to be clear, if you have any conflict of interest, if you have any client that is involved in anything we discuss here, you recuse yourself from the conversation.
I either slam the door and jump out the window into Quay Street traffic, or I tell you and the listeners.
Okay, good. Annabelle, have you got anything to disclose?
No. Is this being recorded?
Yes.
Okay.
That's typically how we work.
I thought this was just a very stiff, formal catch-up.
We've had some feedback.
With my usual disclaimers to Toby before we begin any conversation and also establishing whether we're on or off the record.
Of an entirely different nature, ladies and gentlemen. On feedback, Nicola Keane, who I believe is a television producer, said after the last podcast, "You guys sound as tired as I feel, and we haven't even hit the campaign yet," which was brutal.
That was day 98.
That was day 98.
That was day 98. Now we're into day 87.
Well, you're coming down.
And business has picked up.
T minus 87. Isn't that how you do it?
T minus 87. We're at DEFCON 87.
And that's true. It's raining political cliches. We had Gone By almost just after lunchtime, which was Todd Barclay, who we will get to in a moment. And we had a week is a long time in politics, which it really is. When it was 100 days to go, everything was reasonably plain sailing for Team English. And then what happened? Tuesday last week. We're day 8 of the scandal now. Ben Thomas, what happened on Tuesday last week?
So Tuesday, newsroom.co.nz, which is a startup by a few media veterans, Tim Murphy, ex-Herald, Mark Jennings, ex-TV3, broke a story about that seemed to confirm a story that had been sort of rumoured for the last year or so, that the young Clutha-Southland MP for National, Todd Barclay, had secretly recorded one of his staff members in his electorate office in Gore. this had led to an employment dispute in which the employee had received a significant payout, which had to be topped up by a payment from the Leaders Fund, the National Party Leaders Fund, which draws the Prime Minister's office into this affair.
John Key was the Prime Minister at the time.
John Key was the Prime Minister at the time, and this led to allegations of a cover-up because previously Barclay had denied that. I think he denied allegations of taping.
Right? Yes, he had. He had, and categorically denied it, I think. Yep.
Now, Bill English had, I think, previously said that he was not aware of any issues between staff.
Yes,
and the
in
MP
March
down in
2016, and speaking to RNZ, I think he said he wasn't aware of it. He wasn't aware of any specific issues, and he said another thing I can't remember.
Yeah, so. On Tuesday, I think it was on Monday night before the story ran, Barclay again denied to Newsroom that there had been any kind of recording. It then came to light that the Prime Minister, was then asked again about if he had heard about the issues. He said, I think he couldn't remember where he had heard about the issues.
Tuesday morning, he was asked how he knew about the secret recording because it was on the police statement that he'd reported it. He said he could not recall how he knew.
That's right. And 4 hours later, he released a copy of his police statement showing that he knew because Todd Barclay had told him about the recordings. After a brief phase of defiance, Barclay said that he would not be standing again at the election for Clutha-Southland.
Big story, Annabelle, right? I mean, big story from Newsroom, and it was pretty clear immediately that this was going to change that smooth sailing we talked about earlier.
Yeah, the first scalp of election season, and a big story for Newsroom and Mel Reid, who's a Southland girl. So I guess it was a good fit for her in terms of that's her. She's got strong networks down there, and interestingly, she's broken a lot of stories from within the National Party in the past. So yeah, a big one. I think the one of the most interesting, I think one of the real revelations was when English said that he had reported what he knew to police and then later had to admit that he hadn't actually reported it. He had been approached by police and then had to reveal what he knew, and I think that really, perhaps more than anything else, that's what that's what has affected his credibility as the straighty 180 Bill English that we thought we knew.
Go on, Ben.
I think we absolutely have to talk about Bill English's handling, or perhaps mishandling, of this affair. I'd like to talk about what sort of, what kind of kicked this off.
You want to take us south?
Yeah, look,
take us on a journey.
Yeah, look, a lot of people, the National Party have been saying, well, this is just about an employment dispute. It's clearly not just about an employment dispute anymore, but that's the genesis of this. And so I just wanted to talk about the relationship between an MP and their staff, because it's very different to a normal employment relationship.
Yeah.
The MP and or a minister if they're a minister, or a prime minister if they're prime minister, is being put there by the people of New Zealand or the people of their electorate. And they basically, it's quite an ecclesiastical kind of thing. They're more like a pope than they are an employer. So the Prime Minister, as far as staff and officials are concerned, the Prime Minister is a kind of dictator, and he can be a good dictator or a bad dictator, and a minister is a dictator, and so is an MP within their own electorate. And your job as a staff member, and I say this as a former staff member, your job is just to serve that person and their office. It's not the same as kind of reporting to an editor if you're a journalist, or being a McDonald's worker talking to the shift manager. It's not that there's sort of this greater purpose that you're all working together on, and you should sort of consult on and and come together with an agreement on how you're going to go forward.
I would strongly disagree with that, Ben, about the role of an electorate secretary, because actually they're more than that. They're not just there to serve their minister or MP. They're also there to serve the community and to be a go-between between the community and the MP, so that if they've got trouble with wins or housing or anything like that, they can go to the MP's electorate office, sit down with the electorate secretary, and they help them to organise a case, and goes to the MP on their behalf. So it's an important position because in that electorate secretary, you have someone who keeps your ahika burning in your electorate, but also someone that your community has to be able to trust and know that that office is a safe place for them to share information, and that they can go there and know that they're going to be treated with confidentiality and respect. So I don't think they're just there, to fill out papers for an MP per se.
Look, that's the job description, but their role is to be a conduit to and from the Member of Parliament. They're not there in their own right. And that's why parliamentary contracts have this breakdown of relationship clause, which I'm not aware that any other contracts in New Zealand have, employment contracts have, which is essentially, if you don't gel, your employment can be terminated, you get a generous kind of severance pay, and the parties part ways. And that relationship is incredibly important, and that clause gets invoked, I think Tracy Watkins mentioned in the Don Post, a lot more than people probably think, because the relationship is so important. You don't have to be guilty of any kind of great misconduct to be dismissed from a politician's employment.
But these are all good reasons for Todd Barclay to have invoked that clause and then be done with it.
And right? and this is the interesting thing, right? Because when you read the newsroom story, it's quite clear the relationship is not on a good footing.
I don't think anyone would have denied that.
Yeah, I think there was this extraordinary passage where it said that where Barclay's alleged to have missed a high school prize giving, and told people in his electorate office that he was at the hospital from exhaustion and produced a medical certificate. That's astounding to me that an elected member of parliament would be producing to his electorate staff a medical certificate, like a kid who's missed school one day. That signals that there was something deeply wrong with this relationship. And like you said, why didn't Barclay invoke this clause instead of what seems to have happened, kind of imitating The Wire and being a kind of early 2000s detective and sort of covertly surveilling his staff to gather evidence that he didn't need?
Which is if true, police have investigated it. They're investigating it again now. They're investigating potential illegal act. And that goes beyond any perceived insubordination or sense of insufficiency or whatever.
Yeah,
do you want the Heimlich manoeuvre?
I'm choking. Partly because of this kind of low energy accusation, I brought in a lot of confectionery today, and I'm now, I got some of those after dinner mints already splashed out. The posh ones and they have that thing they sometimes do on your throat where it gets a bit sticky, and so was sort of coughing half the way through Ben Thomas's electorate disquisition, but. My question, now he's eating one, this is dangerous, but I hope you're enjoying the high energy as a result of this performance-enhancing drug taking. My question about to you, Ben, about the, there's a sense that it's Gore versus Queenstown, which I think is kind of interesting.
Wow, is it? I didn't know that.
Why does all politics come down to that?
Well, but if that's a microcosm, so the idea is that it's Gore, which is where Glenys Dixon was, right? And that's the Gore office, and that's the traditional base of Clutha-Southland. That's where Dipton Bill was based there. That's the solid core of the operation in the good old days.
That's right. And Glenys had been working for Bill for 17 years. Here's this young guy coming in, swanning around Queenstown.
Exactly. She'd been there since the BC 25, and Queenstown is the flash new place with the clubs and the bars and the tourists, and Todd Barclay had bought a house up that way.
Todd Barclay's 24 when he became an MP, yeah.
And he was more interested in focusing on the Queenstown stuff because he's in his 20s. That sort of makes sense in a way.
And it's sexy.
But that's quite fun in its own way as an idea of it. But what I'm wondering is whether it also kind of points to deeper potential conflict within the tension within the National Party about what we could call the Queenstown set, which is the liberal-minded, the liberal wing of the National Party, and the Gore set, which is the social conservative set. Does it point up something bigger, or am I just getting overexcited?
No, I think it's just an old-fashioned factional fight. Now, that's not in any way to diminish the alleged actions.
There are those divisions within the National Caucus. It's just that they've been winning and very, very well managed. There are still quite a range of views within the National Party caucus, from the social conservative group through to the kind of liberal economic wing. No.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the issues that will come out of this is that because the Prime Minister's handling of this has been a lot shakier than his predecessors on a range of issues, it will be harder to cover up differences within the caucus kind of going forward.
And certain bloggers have been...
I apologise for just saying going forward. Can we edit that out?
We edit out all the going forward. We have that automated. We're on to Bill English's handling now, Annabelle, and... I mean, in some ways...
Is there one more thing I could say?
Oh, wait, we're going back to Gore. We're going back to Gore, ladies and gentlemen.
Again, like, Barclay, if what's alleged is true...
let us out of Gore.
Made a catastrophic mistake. I think one of the things that comes out of this is the support for new MPs. This didn't used to be an issue back when everyone who came into Parliament was sort of in their late 40s, mid-50s. They were, a small business owner or a farmer.
Yeah.
They had all grown up reading Hansard under the covers and political biographies. And so they had a lot more institutional knowledge. I mean, I understand, there are MPs who go in these days without ever having seen a parliamentary question time or a speech in the House. And I don't know that the parliamentary service, which operates a lot on sort of convention and institutional memory, is providing, the fact that Barclay could have made this mistake when he could have just invoked a clause that's right there in the contract suggests to me that, that we're getting in, a much more diverse range of people these days, but they probably need a couple more days in boot camp or training at the beginning.
You could start a new business there. I mean, since it didn't work out teaching law and private training, you could start Ben Thomas's parliamentary boot camp. That'd be good.
But having said that, while I agree that perhaps it wouldn't hurt to have, more time, in inducting newbie MPs, I think most reasonable-minded adults in that situation would perhaps ring parliamentary services and seek their advice, or a lawyer or something else, rather than pulling out a dictaphone or a camera or whatever it was and recording them. He's 24 years old, not 14.
And it also, I mean, his mentor, seemingly, I mean, I don't know if they were ever super close, but his kind of political uncle is Bill English. So he was the person he was talking to. It's not as though he didn't know people who he could ask about what to... I mean, it seems... And that's part of the problem for Bill English. Like, in a way, it's like, I'm the new guy. That would have been... If he weren't connected geographically and by other kind of personal proximity to the Todd Barclay case, it would be much easier for him to deal with this situation, because he'd simply say, this did not happen on my watch. It's under investigation, blah, blah, blah. But he's connected to it, right? He's like umbilically connected to it.
Yeah, I mean, that's true. Remember at the time, Bill English was Deputy Prime Minister, Finance Minister. It's hard to overstate how busy these guys are. It's not actually easy to get 15 minutes with the Finance Minister, particularly to explain the ins and outs of some problem you're having with an old lady in your electorate office. The patience for that is probably going to be pretty limited. Yeah, none of which again excuses what actually happened.
Yeah, I don't necessarily agree, because I think if it's someone that English has employed for 17 plus years, and there's a serious breakdown in that office in his old electorate, which is obviously his stronghold, his former electorate, that he would have made time.
And in terms of his handling, Annabelle, of over the last 8 days, Bill English, I mean, a lot of people have been comparing it to John Key, and it's kind of a strange thing to hear, because the criticism, a lot of it comes down to he's not as good at spinning stuff as John Key was, therefore he's less. But in a way, that's that's a weird thing to be implicitly lauding, people being sophisticated spinners. I mean, is that part of? I mean, how have you assessed Bill English's management of the situation?
Well, I think Ben's boss Matthew Hooton said it best when he tweeted the other night he should shut the fuck up.
Yeah.
And I think that's true. And it's not that Bill hasn't been, is not as skilled at spinning. There's examples in the story where he has seemingly purposely misled the public, like when he stated that he had reported this issue to the police. Now, there's a big difference between reporting an alleged crime to the police and waiting for who knows how long until the police approach you and ask you what you know, and then going into the House and misleading Parliament about it, and then being forced to own up to what you know. So I think this is an example of why Key was such an astute frontman for the National Party, and I think English has handled this appallingly.
And Key probably would have known to shut the fuck up. I mean, it was interesting I spent most of Monday going through Bill English's statements on this because I'm a sucker for punishment, and then watched the post-cabinet press conference at 4:00, and clearly someone had bellowed into his ear precisely those words, "Shut the fuck up," because he then said,
I have nothing to add.
I have nothing to add on the matter. But then he sort of couldn't help. He kept, and then he added a bit. If he had, in the weekend interviews there was all this there's a police investigation has been underway for there's been a 10-month police investigation. I think they know how to investigate things better than the media do, and blah, blah, and it was all a bit of a shambles. And then there was the have you listened to then the tape may not exist. And then it was because he said that multiply. That was clearly a talking point.
The thing
that's not been established. And then someone asked at the press conference, which he foolishly gave on Sunday at the end of the weird National Party conference, did he offer to play you the tape? And he said, yes, he did offer. Did he offer to play me the tape? Yes, he did.
I think,
even though it may not have existed.
I think that's what's made this even worse, is that English has insulted the intelligence of New Zealanders by trying to spin lines such as, well, I'm not a lawyer, and it was the subject of a police investigation that everyone cooperated with, which clearly they didn't. So that's what's kept this story alive for as long as as it has. And I think the other thing too is Newsroom have been very skillful about teasing out what they know and dropping something new every few days, because it was a Newsroom reporter, wasn't it, that asked a question of English at the press conference on Sunday.
Was it? I didn't know that.
My understanding is that it was a Newsroom reporter that asked if Barclay had offered to pay English the tapes, the sex, drugs and rock and roll tapes.
Sex, drug and stuff. The reason that the Newsroom teased sex and drugs, which we were talking about a bit before, but the reason they didn't add rock and roll is because it takes too long to say that in the South.
No, Gore and Gore is the country music capital of New Zealand. Perhaps for that reason. Yeah, the latest twist, the latest story that's come out gets you to a very circuitous way to being able to use the words sex and drug matters in a story. If you're a news organisation, this is, as I understand, an unnamed source has provided Newsroom with the unredacted full statement of Glenys Dixon, the employee in question, where she recounts her lawyer telling her that she's heard from the Parliamentary Service that Glenys herself said on the tapes something to do with sex and drug matters. And Newsroom, who obviously have no way of confirming this with Glenys Dixon at all, being complete strangers to her, ran this sex and drugs story, which I actually think I think they were lauded for their investigative journalism last week. Rightly so. Yeah, look, great scoop. Terrific story. In their last couple of stories, to me, they've seemed a bit embedded, and we've gone from sort of classic investigative journalism to more sort of advocacy or campaigning journalism.
Well, when the other side won't talk, of course, you're going to end up with, the other side's narrative being stronger.
There's no question they have one, some key sources. There's no doubt about that. So I don't think there's a...
Yeah,
do you think they're actively not covering the other side of the story? I mean, I think if someone from the Queenstown branch of the National Party wants to talk about it, I don't get a sense that they're deliberately shutting out one side of the story.
No, look, but I think that, for instance, they've obviously been in contact with Glenys Dixon. They've interviewed her. If they're going to run this allegation about, say, sex and drugs, in the vaguest terms possible, I would have thought that you would call Glenys Dixon and ask her if that was right, if that was what she had been talking about and what she meant by that. I think that's fair before you put an insinuation like that out there. I mean, Todd Barclay is pretty much dead in a gutter right now politically, and this just seems to be a sort of few deft kicks to the head.
But the thing is that he's not actually dead in a gutter because he's still being paid by the taxpayer and he's still a sitting MP. And National can still continue to push through their legislation until the House rises. So,
I mean, it did sound like he held out quite strongly too. I mean, the story that was on the Politic website, the other website that's been startup news site, was that Paula Bennett, according to Politic, was believed to have conveyed to Barclay that Bill English would stand up in the House and express no confidence in his MP, thereby making it untenable for him to remain. And that question was put by Susie Ferguson to the Prime Minister on Monday morning, 4 times, I think, and his response every time was, "That's just speculation." I mean, it sounds like Todd Barclay, whether or not he's in a gutter, he was clinging on pretty hard to the window ledge, Ben.
Sorry, I'm eating an after dinner, man. Look,
Don't do that, man.
These are really hard issues to manage because even as the Prime Minister of New Zealand, you don't actually have any power to remove a sitting MP, right? And we saw that with the Aaron Gilmore thing, right? Where Gilmore, what did that take? About 2 weeks for him to resign in the end. So all you can do is kind of pull these levers in terms of, pressure behind the scenes. If you were to go public, that would, then you're making it a direct ego challenge at a very, very stressful time for the MP who's under fire from the media. And you're risking that they'll dig in their heels and really prolong things and inflame them. In the end, English took care of this in a day and a half in terms of getting Barclay to stand down, and I actually think that was pretty well done.
Well, it's obviously in National's best interest that he doesn't stand down before the election. But I think there's some interesting things that come out of this story. I think it's an example of white privilege, that someone like Todd Barclay can refuse to cooperate with a police investigation and it just goes away. I highly doubt it would be the same for a 24-year-old young Māori man who was recording people in their office. I think, that it appears that the National Party has very low standards in terms of what they expect of their MPs. He may not have been proven to have broken the law, but surely do we not expect a higher standard of behaviour from elected MPs? Apparently the National Party don't.
And all of this happened before he was selected again for the seat. I mean,
That's right.
In a way, the most surprising thing is that it wasn't dealt with at that point.
And it appears too that people at the very top of the National Party knew and chose to turn a blind eye.
Yeah, so the National Party have they commissioned 2 investigations or reports into activity in the electorate, and I think it was reported on Newsroom that one of them came through last week and said everything was fine. So,
hey, it's cool.
Well, that's all cleared up.
We're good. The other thing, and we probably should stop banging on about this, but the other part of this that we haven't mentioned is in the original story, somewhere in the middle of it was the suggestion that a national board member, and there's been discussion about who that was. We don't get into that. Had put pressure, or maybe that's overstating it. Had called and made and gently suggested that Glenys should withdraw her complaint. And there are questions about whether that could constitute an obstruction of justice, which is, of course, is ramping up the potential illegality by some distance. And so the police are presumably looking into that too, much as they've reopened the investigation. And so it's got a way to play. It'll probably be after the election, but it's still around, right? The smell is still around.
Yeah, look, and the police are still investigating the Barclay matter. This isn't going away anytime soon.
Very quickly on the National Party conference, which this weekend was thrown into, I suppose, some turmoil in terms of its media coverage because of what had happened with Todd Barclay, at the very least overshadowed. In hindsight, they probably would recognise that it might have been a good time to release a policy, but instead it was just a kind of vision speech by Bill English.
An ad.
I read some of it.
A great new ad.
Started dozing off. And the new ad, the Let's Get Together ad.
Yeah,
Come Together, Let's Get Together.
With new original music.
I was hoping it would be that is it Saint Germain, that song? I want you to get together.
Yeah.
I was thinking maybe
Or
it would
Come
be, that would be
Together,
good.
John Lennon.
Come Together right now, over me. Shoot, do.
Abbey Road.
An ad that very sort of self-consciously, I think, shows National as open. They've got seasonal fruit pickers, in
And
close up.
the obligatory welder. It's like I was hoping for a bit of flash dance. That didn't happen. And also you can see the camera rig in the reflection of the window in one of the shots,
really?
which I thought was cool. And then I thought I'm not even going to tweet that now I've mentioned it. And the slogan, we got to see the slogan, which is delivering for New Zealanders.
Obviously had a big impact on you guys.
Delivering. Did you see delivering?
I haven't seen it, no.
Which is if it's like New Zealand Post, delivering for New Zealanders on Tuesday and Thursday and possibly Saturday if you're lucky.
I haven't had time to look because I've been busy reading Ben's tweets.
It's like one of those ads that you think is for the America's Cup or the World Cup, and then it turns out to be about a bank.
Right.
It's
the way last week, a big week in New Zealand politics played out was there was the Labour Party had a sticky situation of its own when it emerged on Politic website, Richard Harman's website, on when was it? On
Thursday.
Thursday morning, first thing Thursday morning maybe, that Labour affiliated, let's say, at the very least, intern program had seen at least some of a group of as many as 90 volunteers
stranded, shipwrecked,
unhappy, shall we say, at the very least, with their situation. They'd been promised that they were going to get talks from Helen Clark and the leaders of the National Party and Buddha,
overseas diplomats, conference calls to Hillary Clinton,
and then they were given what's the Marian Northcote? Awataha, and they weren't happy about that. There was a shower not working. Anyway, people would have seen that, and it sort of shifted focus, at least for a period, onto the Labour Party and onto Matt McCartan, who until recently was the Auckland boss for Labour campaign, and before that, Chief of Staff to Andrew Little and David Cunliffe. How damaging was that for Labour, do you reckon, Annabelle Lee?
I think it could have been very damaging for Labour, except they did a much better job of managing the media around it than what Bill English did with Barclay. So basically, Andrew Little immediately stepped up, took full responsibility, and then shafted all blame back to McCartan, and it worked wonders. I think it died quite quickly as a result, instead of trying to...
Still stand accused of hypocrisy, given their campaigns against immigration, worker rights.
I understand that, but the thing is that these volunteer students aren't coming in and taking over full-time positions that could be filled by...
Matt's already out of work. By
New Zealanders. These sorts of internships are not unusual. Obviously, the organisation around it has been ballsed up quite badly, and promises have been made that couldn't be delivered on. But I don't think it's as hypocritical as what some are trying to spin it as. And I was actually pleasantly surprised by how well it was managed by Labour.
It's true. I was half expecting Andrew Little to come on the radio and say, nothing to do with us, despite the fact that it was advertised with the Labour Party written at the top of the forms. But he did, as Annabelle says, Ben, he did say, we're dealing with it, we're not trying to shirk responsibility entirely.
Yeah, and more remarkably for a politician who says, I'm taking responsibility, they took responsibility.
In terms of trying to deal with
they took over the program and started dealing with the students and organising it. Now, and I think that's really admirable. I think Andrew Little and Andrew Curtin, the Labour Party president, General Secretary,
did a great job.
bad for Labour in that, as you say, completely undercuts every single one of their key messages coming into the election.
It's a shame that it came out so close to the release of their immigration policy that was basically having a crack at dodgy PTEs and all of that stuff.
Yeah.
It was unfortunate in that
And
respect.
given the Barclay fiasco, they should have been on the front foot,
Yes.
and they were on the back foot.
I mean, look, to say that Labour are completely blameless in this and that it was just, that's certainly what I've been hearing from Labour people is that Matt McCartan sort of exiled up to Auckland when a bit Heart of Darkness, a bit Apocalypse Now, nobody could get hold of him, he wouldn't reply to emails, he's building this kind of kingdom of this Les Mis army of sort of young people. And but when you actually, but interestingly enough, even though it was advertised as a Labour fellowship to these kids, but there were a few Labour proxies in the media saying, Matt McCartan, of course, has left the party to run this non-partisan, get out the vote, encourage young people kind of scheme. And talking to Labour people, it seems that they were actually pretty aware of what was going on. So I don't think that they're blameless.
They're guilty of a lack of oversight, aren't they?
Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, look, they obviously didn't have any idea of the scale of what McCartan was doing. But again, look, they've tidied it up. It's bad for them in the sense that there's been, sort of 6 o'clock news footage of sort of heaped up mattresses and, that kind of thing with, associated with Labour who are trying to talk about substandard housing, those kinds of things. But look, I think in reality they handled it well.
I'm just going to pause here to acknowledge, as I should have done earlier, Life Direct, who are our sponsors, and you can see them on every... don't laugh at me, Madeline. Madeline Chapman is laughing at me. On every Spin-Off Politics page, and you fill out your doodles on the thing on the right and get some life insurance and become a happier person. Do you think...
What? That if you were thinking of smuggling methamphetamine into New Zealand, you might want to contact Life Direct.
That is such a good idea. Sage advice.
What is he talking about?
I was trying to do a smooth segue into
Hone. Segue into Hone.
Is that... Can we cut that out? Just cut the whole thing.
That was fine. That was fine, but I haven't finished my little break yet.
Okay, sorry.
Because I was gonna also say I've just got this housekeeping, that because I never say this, that you can subscribe to us on iTunes and all the other things as well. And actually, I opened up iTunes, which and there's some couple of comments there. We're actually doing all right in the ratings. Give us a nice rating if you've listened this far. You can't hate it completely. Give us a nice rating. It's got customer reviews. And one of them from someone called Ruscoli says, very disturbed by Ben's near rabid anti-Wellingtonianism. Get a grip, Ben. It's not as if you're comparing it to Wanaka or somewhere nicer. You're in an Auckland traffic queue, for goodness sake. What do you have to say to Ruscoli?
I am a public transport user and I take the train. I get places by circling them very slowly in decreasing concentric kind of radiuses.
And we're going to talk about Hone now, thanks to Ben's segue in a moment. Because first I wanted to say, just in passing, just struck me, just as we were talking, that given Labour were a little bit hobbled by what happened in terms of their ability to, obviously they put up a fair bit of oppositional power against Barclay, but I didn't see the Greens much anywhere. And maybe I wasn't looking in the right places, but I mean, obviously Winston was loving it and making hay, and we'll maybe get on to him in a second too. But I sort of felt like Russell Norman would have been everywhere. He would have been in there finding a really good kind of, a really strong, principled line that he would have forged out. It just seemed like a moment where you would have thought the Greens could leap in, and I didn't notice that they did.
No, so you've got to be careful with these things in the sense that Andrew Little did insert himself into the Barclay thing, I think on, was it Monday? And he said...
Monday, Tuesday.
Maybe it was Tuesday. He said, if those tapes are out there, we have to know what's on those tapes. And the whole point is like breach of privacy, right? We don't need to know what's on the tapes. Andrew Little was sort of like a guy who had come in halfway through a movie screening and was like pretending he knew what was going on. And
it's a bit like this podcast a lot of the time, isn't it?
And so I think you've got to be careful, because the thing is the government was doing, I think from Saturday onwards, the government was doing a great job of impaling itself on this issue.
You mean they were better left alone? Is that what you're saying? Get out of the way.
Sometimes that's the best tactic.
Yeah. Do you have any thoughts on that, Annabelle?
No, but maybe he would have secured solar panels for the marae or something like that. That's what he would have done.
Winston turned up with his mining helmet. Winston, meanwhile, has been sort of making hay, though. He's been in there doing, he kind of went, he was calling for Bill English's resignation on multiple occasions.
Was it Jane Clifton who said, how long till Winston says, I've heard the tapes.
Right, yes, that's true. But he's having everything is falling into place for Winston.
Everything is coming up Winston,
and he's been doing the regions hard, and he's been promising GST rebates for the regions and all. I mean, is he the unstoppable force of 2017, or is there a ceiling?
Yeah, no, I think everything is just playing perfectly into his hands, and then of course we're going to get the big announcement, aren't we? This week.
The Shane Jones announcement.
Matua.
Matua.
Shane Jones, etc.
Matua Shane.
Yep. Shane Jones, etc. Yeah, well, I mean, that's not going to surprise anybody, really, is it? I mean, the only surprise would be if he weren't to do it. Is it going to be Whangarei? He's going to stand it?
No idea.
That seems to be the
word. Speaking of the North, Hone Harawira, Hone Duterte, this week, was announcing that he was keen to execute people who, then Thomas knows, who import methamphetamine.
Yes, that's his plan. Is Chinese drug dealers bringing methamphetamine into the country will face the death penalty or life imprisonment.
Was it strictly just the Chinese ones, or was it nationality neutral?
Well, Hone took a bit of flack on social media for this, sort of saying, "Oh, bigoted." But the reality is that all the methamphetamine coming into New Zealand is coming from China ultimately. And it's coming in increasing numbers. You'll see these press releases from customs sort of hailing how they stopped twice as much methamphetamine at the border as they did last year, and of course that means about 3 times as much as getting through as the previous year, most likely. Really ramped up. I was speaking to Hone before the Nation, where he unveiled this bold policy, and he was talking about the problems up north and just how prevalent it is. And I'm a white middle class person in Auckland.
I'm one of those too. And there it is. It is serious, though, isn't it? He is speaking to people who have experiences that are life crushing, right?
People in law enforcement are saying that where they used to, if they stopped somebody for a minor offence and searched them, they used to find a bit of weed. Now they're finding pee, and they're finding more pee than they were 3 years ago. The amount that people are carrying around is increasing.
Mm. Yeah. As Ben said, people were outraged on Twitter, but this is not, these sorts of statements from Hone aren't designed to appeal from people who buy vegan pies from Mamata Bakery and quinoa from Harvest Whole Food in West Lynn. These are for people in the north who are seeing the devastating effects of pee, their mokos' faces getting punched in and brutalised and all the rest of it, all the awful havoc that it's reaping up there. And so while extreme and concerning, I understand, I also see what his strategy is in terms of making these sorts of statements, and it's to appeal to those types of people, not to people who sign petitions on Action Station.
And it is, the Duterte comparison is a serious one, I think, really, because Duterte won on a wave of popular support in the Philippines because of what people saw happening to their communities with drug taking. Right?
Yeah.
But at the same time,
that's not going to be an issue here, though, is it? Because we've only got Hone standing that we know of so far. So it's not like he's going to sweep into power and take over Parliament and we're going to see people getting lined up and shot. This is just about him trying to activate his support base in the far north by making statements that are going to, for want of a better word, electrify them into action.
And show he's serious.
Does he have a chance
of winning back the north? Well, it was only 740-something votes last time, and with the deal with the Māori Party, it'll be interesting to see what happens, because I think, no doubt, Calvin has made some huge gains over the last 3 years, He's active, he's visible, he kanohi kitea. He's been an excellent opposition MP, but whether or not that deal that Hone has done with the Māori Party sees some votes swing back to Hone, I don't know. So it's definitely going to be one of the most interesting seats to watch in the election, I think.
Yeah, on the numbers he should do it. If all the
Hone should do it.
If the Māori Party,
but the Māori Party voters could easily split.
I dare say that we'll see some of them go to Winston, over to Winston. Some of that Māori Party vote, some to Labour and some to Mana. It just depends on how it all. But it's anyone's for the taking, isn't it? 740 votes.
It's getting exciting, it's been a pretty amazing couple of weeks since we last gathered here, and we're going to keep trying to do these every fortnight if we can manage it.
We did this one. We scheduled it and we did it.
Well done us. Yeah, well done us. It's impressive. And now that on that magnificent crescendo. No, wait.
Can I just say one thing?
Yes.
Before we go, I want to acknowledge the passing of Keith Slater, kaumātua friend and mentor of the hui, a great newsman, a great investigative journalist, someone who passionately believed in the power of journalism, and really sad that we farewell him today. Nō reira e te rua nuku, moe mai rai, Keith.
Are you curious about how business can be better? I'm Simon Pound, and I host Business is Boring, a podcast where I kōrero with some of the most interesting people in entrepreneurship, commerce, and making things happen. Tune in to Business is Boring every Tuesday, brought to you by the Spin-Off Podcast Network in partnership with Spark Business Lab.
Kia ora e te iwi, Te Aihe Butler here, podcast manager at the Spin-Off. If you enjoy listening to our podcasts, consider supporting our mahi by signing up to become a Spin-Off member at thespinoff.co.nz/donate.
The Spin-Off Podcast Network.